Dungeon masters destroy their great games by running great games. How is that even possible? Well, great games can fall apart because of a difference in tone. Tone represents the general characteristics or attitude of your D&D game. It's how it feels to play the game. A game like Curse of Strahd has a gothic horror tone, filled with spooky castles, mist, and grim situations, while Dungeon of the Mad Mage has a dungeon crawling tone, filled with dungeons, obviously. New and veteran game masters alike struggle with keeping a consistent tone, and if your tone clashes with what the party expects, well, your great game can fall apart. The players are a part of the story. So imagine game masters and players are in a band together. The game master is trying to play jazz, while the players are trying to play heavy metal. It's gonna sound terrible when you get up on stage and try to start playing together. When your game's tone doesn't match with what your players want, your game will die. Both you and your players need the same tone so that you can play in harmony with each other. This gets even worse when your game doesn't have a consistent core tone, so the sessions are very uneven. One session can be this epic fantasy campaign, while the next is this straight up horror campaign. And that's fine once or twice. Variety is the spice of life. But if there's no core for the campaign to return to, it's harder for the players to slot into roleplay. It's harder to understand the world and therefore their own characters. When there isn't a core to a campaign, players will find it harder to get invested. They've lost that touchstone that allows them to connect to your campaign world and story. Brennan Lee Mulligan is the current king of establishing tone in his campaigns. Watch Session 1 of A Crown of Candy and Starstruck Odyssey. Heck, I challenge you to watch the first 15 minutes of each. They're free on YouTube. Notice how he sets the tone of a campaign in these first 15 minutes. One is this epic political intrigue fantasy, the other this goofy space opera, and Brennan carries that same tone throughout the adventure that he sets up within the first 15 minutes. But you have to be asking, Colin, how do I create a tone for my campaign that I want to run? Well, first, you gotta know what you're after and return to it. If you're running a mystery campaign, during planning, return to those mystery tropes that got you excited to run this campaign. Returning to what you're after also means that NPCs should stick to the core tone even if your players start to drift. Again, if you're running this 1920s noir mystery campaign, your NPCs have to stay within that setting. Having some NPCs start to act like 1980s action heroes will totally throw off the tone that you're trying to set. And if the NPCs drift with your players, then you've lost your core. Your players won't have other characters to look to as a guide marker for where their tone should be. So make sure you're returning to those core ideas not only with your planning, but with your NPCs. Don't let them drift. Secondly, you're gonna plan for events that reinforce the tone once every session or two. So that means if you're running a comedic campaign, there's one gag scene or bit every session. On the other hand, if you're running a grimdark campaign, that's some world event happening every session or two to remind the party how dark a place your campaign and setting is. These events help to strengthen your core tone. The more times your players see something that relates to the tone of your campaign happening, the stronger it becomes in their minds and in their memories. Reinforcing your tone through these campaign world events is so important because when your players think back on your world, on the story, on the campaign, that tone is going to be embedded in their memories. That tone will become a part of how they think about the world and their own characters. And speaking of their characters, number 3, you're going to want to weave that tone into their backstories. If your players build characters with that core tone, they'll have it woven into their roleplay ideally. Once again, we want to get your players thinking in terms of the tone that you're setting for your campaign. All the members of your band need to be playing the same song so it sounds good. Helping to weave your campaign's core tone into your players' backstories is like practicing before going up on stage. You and your bandmates have to get in sync before you go and actually play a concert. So make sure to spend just that extra little bit of time during session 0 weaving in the core tone to your players' backstories. And number 4, and this one combines with the previous point and is the most important. The players have to buy into the tone of your campaign. Game masters can only run games that players want to play. This sounds simple, but it's missed by so many game masters out there. Guys, if I could, I'd run horror campaigns all the time. I love running spooky campaigns. But I don't have players that want to buy into that tone. Yeah, you might be able to run an awesome dungeon crawler, but if your party is geared towards political intrigue, well, no matter what you do, that game is gonna fall apart. Your game's tone has to match what the party wants. Yes, you're the game master, it's your game, but nobody has to play your game if they don't want to. TTRPGs are all about give and take between the game master and their players. All of you are collaborating on this collective story, so you need the players to buy in to whatever you're doing. And once you know what your party wants, you can begin to write your new campaign. So check out this video right here to learn how to structure your next TTRPG adventure. And thank you for entering the dungeon.